Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Megan Fox, and I write for PJ Media. And tonight I'm going to read to you. Now, um, present. What is this? Oh, StreamYard has updated some things, and I'm not familiar with the new. It used to say share screen. Now it says present screen, as if that makes a big difference. So let's get over to the Washington Post article. I did the unthinkable. You guys, do you know what I did? I let a Washington Post reporter call me, and I gave her an interview. Now, this is not for newbies. If you're going to let the Washington Post interview you, you have to be very careful, and you have to make sure you have evidence of that interview, which I do, but I don't have to use, because it turns out that Kimberly Kindy did a decent job um, getting some of my thoughts across to her audience without misrepresenting what I said, which is very rare. But I thought I would read it to you tonight. So if you have any chores you want to get done, now is the time. So this is following up after our week-long campaign to bring awareness in Oklahoma and across the country to what the Oklahoma University Children's Hospital was doing with its gender clinic, Roy G. Biv, that was sterilizing, chemically castrating, giving kids cross-sex hormones, all to children, and referring them out for mutilating surgeries like top surgery, which they admitted they had referred 5 minor girls for that surgery in Oklahoma. Now, the reason why this was a big deal was because the Oklahoma legislature was giving them lots and lots of money. $108 million in federal funds were going to the hospital on Thursday of that week. And on Monday, we started bringing attention with the Unwokable podcast, Mark Ousley, who broke the story, to tell people that Republicans were about to hand $108 million to a hospital that was chemically castrating kids. So after we did that, the legislature suddenly got a fire under its ass and wrote new language in the bill denying the funding if this continued. And OU Health claims that it has shut down or is in the process of shutting down certain gender services, though they will not tell us what those are. So I got a call from Kimberly Kindy at the Washington Post. I don't know how these people get my number, but this is the second reporter from a big paper who has called me on my direct cell phone line. And I can tell you, it freaks me out a bit. I think the last one who called me was from like the New York Post. I'm thinking, how do you people get my phone number? I'm not listed anywhere. But I didn't ask her how she got it. I just decided to do the interview. All right. This is the article she wrote. Oklahoma GOP ties hospitals' COVID funds to end of gender-affirming care. Of course, they don't say for minors. It should say for minors, because that's the big deal here. It's about kids at a children's hospital. Republicans threatened to withhold $108 million in federal funds if one of the state's biggest hospital systems didn't cease the procedures. When Oklahoma lawmakers met last week to distribute more than $108 million in federal pandemic relief funds for one of the state's largest hospital systems, many expected a routine vote in favor of upgrading its medical records and cancer treatment center. Instead, Republican lawmakers added an explosive provision. OU Health would only get these funds, including $39.4 million for a new pediatric mental health facility. Actually, it was 46.8 or 0.9. It was more than that. If its Oklahoma Children's Hospital stopped providing gender-affirming care. Again, that's a misleading statement. It's not gender-affirming care. It's chemical castration. They're using Lupron. It's a chemical castration drug. Please look it up. Go ahead and Google it. It was used to castrate sex offenders. That's not gender-affirming care. It's gender-denying non-care. It's gender-denying experimentation. It is every bit as experimental as lobotomies and every bit as damaging. The move, which Oklahoma Governor Kevin J. Stitt, Republican, signed into law on Tuesday, marks the first time conservative state lawmakers have successfully tied the culture war issue to a receipt of funds from the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, the $1.9 trillion effort to restart the economy and harden medical care during the coronavirus pandemic. And let me just say, folks, a Republican state with a supermajority in both houses and a Republican governor should never have taken those funds, okay? What kind of strings do those funds come with for the federal government? And now they're probably going to find out, because the federal government will probably sue them for doing this. They should never have taken this money. We're in the middle of inflation. Numbers are sky high, and taking printed money that we don't actually have, that the feds are just printing, is just gonna make inflation worse, and conservative states shouldn't be doing this, but that's my opinion, and they did it, so let's move on. Oklahoma Republicans, who were pushed into action through a campaign led by a pair of conservative podcasters, hailed the move as necessary. That would be me and Mark Ousley. Hailed the move as necessary to restrict the type of medical care for young transgender patients that has riled the party's base this year. I take issue with this sentence. Medical care? It's not medical care, it's medical negligence. It is malfeasance. It is not care. You know what? I mm, I don't have time to do that right now. I was gonna do something, but I'm not doing it right now. I'm just gonna move on. But it is medical negligence. When you talk to some of the detransitioners that I've talked to or covered their stories, please go on pjmedia.com and look for my coverage of detransitioners because I have lots of them. You will see that the medical care that they're claiming to be giving to some people is medically detrimental. It is negligence. It is medical abuse. It is not medical care to destroy someone's perfectly healthy body, in with false promises that they will be the opposite sex, which you cannot be. You can never be the opposite sex. It's written on your bones. It's written in your blood. You are what you are. Now, you might live or dress a certain way that makes you feel comfortable, and that's totally different than trying to change your body from one sex to the other, which cannot work. By signing this bill today, we are taking the first step to protect children from permanent gender transition surgeries and therapies, said in a statement. It is wildly inappropriate for taxpayer dollars to be used for condoning, promoting, or performing these types of controversial procedures on healthy children. I agree with him. It's wildly inappropriate. Some advocates worry the latest move in Oklahoma might embolden other legislatures with Republican majorities, well, God, I hope so, to add similar restrictions before allocating federal and state money to publicly funded hospitals and clinics. Why shouldn't they? You don't just hand these people state tax dollars and then just we'll do whatever you want with them. Hell no. Hell no. The people of your state expect you to use their tax money wisely. No one wants their tax money used for mutilating kids, for harming children. For God's sake, hundreds of anti-LGBTQ bills have been introduced, and I take umbrage with this wording as well. Hundreds of anti-LGBTQ bills? No, they're not anti-LGBTQ bills. They're just not. Like I'm assuming she's talking about the um, Parents' Rights and Education bill in Florida that the Democrats wrongfully called the Don't Say Gay bill, which didn't have the word gay in it anywhere. That only says you can't teach this crap to kids from K through 3. Like, really? You have to teach every little second and third grader that they might be born in the wrong body? What's wrong with you? You have a problem. That's not anti-LGBTQ. It is pro common sense. Have been introduced, but see how they do this? Kimberly Kindy, I'll say this for her. She was very nice on the phone. She understood that I would probably not wanna talk to her. She even said, "I was really happy you talked to me because I knew you probably didn't want to." She knows, she's aware of the animosity between conservative media and mainstream big media. But this is one of the reasons why, the way they phrase things. Hundreds of anti-LGBTQ bills. According to who? Only Democrats. Republicans don't see them as anti-LGBTQ bills. My gay Republican friends don't see them as anti-LGBTQ bills. Jamie Michel of Gays Against Groomers did not see those bills as anti-LGBTQ bills. She saw them as child protection bills, which is what they were. It's what they are. All of this is child protection. So to categorize it as anti-LGBTQ is just false. It's a wrong narrative. And this is just the way they state things that makes it sound like we are homophobic and we don't like gay people. And it's garbage. It's not true. Because I can name tons of gay people who were in support of these bills. So calling them anti-LGBT doesn't make any sense. Moving on, this year, at least 160 measures were considered, with nearly two-thirds of them focused on transgender rights. Well, that's because the transgender cult is pushing this stuff on our kids in school through books and violating our safe spaces for women and girls, taking away their right to privacy and dignity. This is happening at an alarming rate, and that's why so many of bills need to combat it, because it's everywhere. Moving on, Oklahoma was part of this trend with bill restricting bathrooms and sports access for transgender residents. I think she needs A in here. Oklahoma was part of this trend with a bill restricting bathrooms and sports access for transgender residents. Okay, so what? Women deserve their safe places. That's not anti LGBTQ. It is seriously pro woman and girl. That's what it is. See how it makes a difference when you use different language? Transgender advocates and medical experts, though, look at medical. Well, what medical experts? Say OU Health's facilities had been following best practices in its gender affirming care. Yeah, they have been. You know why? Because the medical community is overtaken by woke morons, and they are completely ignoring the studies out of Sweden, the studies out of Holland. They're ignoring the harms that have been done to children in Europe, who are way further ahead of this than we are. And they're ignoring it completely and pretending like it's not happening. They're ignoring what happened at Tavistock. They're ignoring the Kira Bell nightmare. They're ignoring all of that. And so I don't think we should care what best practices are, because they're wrong. OU health officials would not outline which services will halt as a result of the legislation. Now, isn't that interesting? And I would like to say I'm the one that told Kimberly that, and I'm glad she put it in there, because she must have gone back and tried to ask them and they wouldn't tell her. Moving on, but one Oklahoma pediatrician who treats transgender youth in the region said she believes all hormone therapy and surgeries will cease. In order to receive this treatment, they will now have to go out of state, Shauna Lawless said. Well, good. Why are they getting this treatment? It's experimental. About 100 children are receiving gender-affirming care at the center, Democrats. I'm sorry, I can't say gender-affirming one more time. I'm changing it to gender-destroying care. About 100 children are receiving gender-destroying care at the center, Democratic State Senator Carrie Hicks told reporters. So you know what? 100 families need to be investigated for Munchausen syndrome by proxy, because children are not trans. Children do not have gender identities. No one has a gender identity. It's just an infinite number of personalities. And you can express your personality in all different ways. You do not have to go under the knife and remove body parts, healthy body parts, to express your personality. Moving on, parents of transgender children. It's a misnomer. Transgender children don't exist. A transgender child is like a vegan cat. Everybody knows who's pulling the strings. Parents of transgender children who are receiving care at Oklahoma Children's Hospital say they may have to travel to Kansas or Colorado. Kansas, another red state, by the way. Shane Poindexter, whose 14-year-old transgender son, so daughter, has been treated at the hospital for a year and is receiving hormone suppression drugs, said his son, daughter, had attempted suicide before going to the clinic. You know, kids who are attempting suicide don't need uh, gender drugs. They don't need cross-sex hormones. What they need is serious talk therapy. And putting a suicidal child on experimental chemical castration drugs should be illegal. They need to address why the child is so depressed that she attempted suicide. They need to address that. They need to address why the suicidal thoughts and actions are there. Is it abuse? Is it assault? What is the problem that's behind it? Has anybody found out? It is someplace they can go and be who they are and be accepted. Kids are bullies, Poindexter said. It was mentally destroying her. The love and affection from that place is amazing. We don't know what we're going to do now. Well, Mr. Poindexter, I would suggest that you get your daughter into serious therapy right now. Talk therapy. Talk therapy. And you should find out if she has other diagnoses that have been overlooked because they fast tracked her into a transgender pathway towards medicalization instead of looking at what are the underlying causes of these suicidal thoughts. What is the underlying cause of the gender dysphoria? Gender dysphoria is caused by lots of things, including trauma. Has the child had trauma? That's what you should be exploring. Hormones are not a patch. The federal stimulus includes about 350 billion to prop up state and local government budgets with virtually no strings attached. By late last year, as it became clear that the economy was recovering far faster than lawmakers had expected, it paved the way for states to put the aid to use in unanticipated ways. In Oklahoma, the legislature opened a public portal last year, allowing any state resident to submit a request for the discretionary funds. They received more than 1,400 proposals that a state legislative committee reviewed this summer before sending dozens of them to the full legislature for a vote. The state and local funds are part of a bigger pool of nearly 5 trillion that Washington D.C. just printed out and sent out in the first 2 years of the pandemic, which we didn't have, causing inflation and high grocery prices. Right? She didn't write that, but that's what happened. If you're wondering why steak is so much money, creating an unprecedented challenge to account for how the money was spent. I mean, they're basically devaluing the dollar. Eventually, you're going to have to go to the store with a wheelbarrow full of cash in order to buy a loaf of bread and a gallon of milk. With almost no rules on how states use their share, some Republican governors have tried to pay for tax cuts with the aid, for example. In Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis and other GOP state legislators used interest they earned on federal aid to pay for a $12 million fund that covered the cost of flying migrants to Massachusetts last month. That was the greatest troll on earth. Children's hospitals around the country have also faced escalating threats of violence. Now, she told me this was not going to be in here, but clearly it is. Over online anti-LGBTQ campaigns targeting gender-affirming care. Some states have taken other actions to block public funds from being used for transgender care. This year, Florida became one of the least of at least 10 states that have blocked Medicaid coverage for the procedures. It's so outrageous and unbelievably mean-spirited, said Catherine Oakley, state legislative director and senior counsel at the Human Rights Campaign, which advocates for the LGBTQ community in reference to Oklahoma's bill. It is literally about COVID relief. It's about restarting the economy. Well, ma'am, cry harder. Because it wasn't just about that. It was about giving millions of dollars to woke you that was pushing transgender experimentation on children. Moving on. The push to end OU's transgender uh, non care was accelerated by two conservative podcasters who last month began demanding action from legislators on their programs of social media. It was really literally just last week. The target of their ire was the Roy G. Biv program at Oklahoma Children's Hospital, which for the last 6 years has offered mental health counseling and hormone therapy, including puberty blockers. In a handful of cases, it has also referred patients transitioning from female to male to surgeons for mastectomies. Minors, people, minors. She did not mention that these are minors. Oh, I'm sorry. I have to go over and call her out on Twitter right now because that's ridiculous. That's absurd, Kimberly. Absurd. How do you not mention, how do you not mention that these mastectomies are for minors? Oh my gosh. Hold on. Oh, oh, this is misleading. It really is. I have to tweet this out right now. I'm sorry. I have to. Oh my God. I mean, they want to talk about disinformation, that we're causing disinformation. That's disinformation right there. Did you get do you understand that these patients who got double mastectomies were minors by reading this? It has also referred patients transitioning from female to male to surgeons for mastectomies. Why didn't she mention that it was for minors? They don't want you to know. Mark Ousley appealed to his 20,000 Twitter followers and listeners to his Oklahoma-based Unwokable podcast in mid-September to call on lawmakers and demand OU Health's federal money be withheld. He was later joined by Megan Fox, a conservative podcaster. She refused to put PJ Media in here. I told her I work for PJ Media, but she didn't put it in here. And notice she also did not link either Mark's podcast or mine because, the Washington Post does not want to drive its readers to find the truth. He was later joined by Megan Fox, a conservative podcaster who broadcast the calls she made to lawmakers and provided her 23,000 Twitter followers with scripts to do the same. I'm going to make it my mission in life to shame any Republican that votes for this, Ousley wrote in a September 25th tweet. Now, I have it on good authority that she was going to it must have got cut by editing. She was going to quote me as saying, "These GOP losers who vote for this should all be, voted out of office." And I really would have enjoyed that. And I'm sorry that it got cut because that would have made my day. Transgender advocates and Oklahoma lawmakers said the campaign had a noticeable effect. Well, great. One of them spent an entire day live streaming, yeah, that was me, calling legislative staff, asking them why they were committing child abuse, said Cindy Nugent. Yeah, it is child abuse, Cindy, policy director for the American Civil Liberties Union of Oklahoma. There was a lot of inflammatory language. It built momentum. Inflammatory language. It's interesting how it suits them. When it suits them to use inflammatory language, they don't have any problem doing it. When they want to call us Nazis and terrorists, they do it all day long. But the second we say they're abusing children, now it's we're engaging in inflammatory language. You know what, lady? America is an inflammatory place. The First Amendment is an inflammatory amendment. It is meant specifically for inflammatory language, and I will not apologize for it, and I will not stop doing it. Stop abusing children. Stop defending people, Cindy Nugent, who abuse children in the name of medicine. That's child abuse, and it's grooming, and you should stop it. Republicans introduced the bill September 28th. In a debate on Thursday, Republican lawmakers argued young patients were taking hormones that could be physically damaging, something that the American Medical Association disputes. Of course they do. They're ignoring all the evidence to the contrary and said all transitioning surgeries for Oklahomans under 18 should be outlawed. I think it should be under 21, but that's just me. Actually, it should be under 25, since your brain doesn't fully develop until you're 25. To promote and help facilitate with taxpayer money, the gender reassignment should be disallowed in the state, said State Senator Jake Merrick. I think it reflects the majority of the opinions and values held in the state. Several Democratic lawmakers in the House, meanwhile, yielded their time to State Rep. Maury Turner, Democrat, Oklahoma's first openly non-binary legislator, who appealed to her colleagues, their colleagues. I will not use their for a single person. No, I won't. To her colleagues to not be influenced by the social media and phone call campaign. I hope that one day you understand maybe a little bit of what it's like to be born into a body that isn't yours. That's a mental disorder, ma'am. If you think you were born into a body that's not yours, that is a mental problem. That is not reality. You were born in exactly the right body, the one you were given, the one that was formed up around your cells. That's the one you were given. You don't have another option than that. So you need to cope with it and use coping mechanisms that are not using scalpels to turn your body into some kind of freak show that causes all kinds of other problems. Makes you a patient for life, possibly facing chronic pain. It's just not a solution. Continuing, that's what our youth across Oklahoma are facing, Turner said. Yeah, they're facing it because the adults in the room are not being adults. The adults are not saying, this is garbage and you're fine just the way you are, and we're going to help you accept your body. Adding that she came out to her mother in the second grade. Oklahoma has the money to take care of our people, and we do not have to wage this war against them, and we don't have to use our children, our youth, as pawns. Please vote no, she said. Well, I would disagree that they're using children as pawns. I think the medical community is using children as pawns to make $200,000 or more per kid on these surgeries and chemical castrations. That's what I think. So there's always a different way to look at it. The bill passed the House 68 to 23 following a Senate approval at 31-13. Although the votes were largely along party lines, a few Republicans in both chambers voted against the bill, either because they said the language targeting the OU health program wasn't strong enough or because they were opposed to accepting and doling out the pandemic relief funds altogether. Yeah, I agree with both of those things. It was not strong enough, and they shouldn't be doling out that money. They should send it back to the feds. OU Health reacted quickly to the measure, saying last week that it was already proactively planning the ceasing of certain gender medicine services. But Richard Lofgren, president and CEO of OU Health, sent an email on Friday to employees of the healthcare system, saying that although he knew some members of the legislature might introduce bills targeting the transgender program, he did not expect it to be tagged to the ARPA request. Well, surprise. Surprise, sir. It was. Lofgren also expressed dismay that the legislature required that the transgender medical non care stop immediately. Well, cry harder, sir. Because, yeah, you do have to stop medically abusing kids immediately, please. We were not provided with a reasonable timeline to safely transition the care of our patients, he wrote in the email that was obtained by the Washington Post. For our physicians, it is morally distressing to the guiding principles of our profession and our Hippocratic oath to not be able to provide a safe transition of care, but we have to comply with the law. Well, let me ask you something, sir. If puberty blockers are completely reversible, then why can't they just stop taking them? You can just stop taking them. They don't have to continue taking them, right? Because they're reversible and it's no big deal, right? You don't need time to safely transition the care? No, you don't. Just stop taking them. Stop prescribing them. Tell the children, give the children mental help that they need, and stop chemically castrating them. It's that easy. Those are not normal chemicals in their bodies. Stop giving them to them. A group of Republican lawmakers and the podcasters are pushing for more. Damn straight. Last week, a group of senators held a news conference saying that the next step should be a permanent statewide ban on medical services that assist Oklahoma youth with gender transitioning. Why won't they use the actual term, chemical castration? It would make a big difference. We should have an immediate statewide prohibition on these surgeries, on these puberty blockers, on what is being done to these children, State Senator Nathan Dahm, who recently appeared on Owsley's podcast, and he was on mine too, said at the news conference. Dahm, who has previously introduced legislation on this topic but has so far failed to get a hearing, did not respond to calls seeking comment. On Saturday, Republican lawmakers continued to push for a statewide ban, appealing to Stitt to call another special session. We can't wait until session and then hope we can get something passed. This is your moment, Merrick said in a tweet, tagging both Fox and Owsley. The Post came, they're trying to like tie these people to me and Mark, to say that like we're in the bag, we're working with them. Um, I don't think that's true necessarily. I think we're the only people uh, broadcasting their opinions, and so of course they're gonna tag us in it. I mean, I don't know Senator Dom very well. It's not like he's on speed dial. He's not texting me or anything. So what? He tagged me in a tweet. He knows I'll retweet it. The post came days after Merrick appeared on Owsley's podcast. Merrick did not respond to a call seeking comment. But Stitt on Tuesday said he won't call another special session on the matter and instead called for a permanent ban on the treatments to be passed next year. I think that's a mistake. I think he should call a special session, but they're going to do what they do. I am calling for the legislature to ban all irreversible gender transition surgeries and hormone therapies on minors when they convene next session in February 2023, he said. Advocates say the bill Stitt signed on Tuesday has already set a dangerous precedent. It's about funding health care for children, and they are making that contingent on them denying medically necessary care for them on the basis of discrimination and gender identity, Oakley said. But no, that's not true. As a child in Oklahoma, you can't get a tattoo, you can't buy a beer, you can't rent a car, you can't even get Sudafed without being 18 to 25, depending on, what the thing is. You can't rent a car till you're 25. Um, so no, it's a silly argument. I hope they do write legislation and pass a statewide ban on this. Minor children should be protected from this cult ideology, which is what it is. It is not scientific. There is no scientific evidence that this helps children. or that suicide will decrease. In fact, I've seen studies. If you look at the suicide numbers over the last 40 years, suicide actually started going down in 1994. It has been low up until 2020 when it has started spiking in youth again from 2020 on. Now, what do you think happened in 2020 that would have caused a suicide spike in young people? Could it be that their schools were taken away from them, that they were locked down, that they were kept from all social activities? Could it be COVID mandates? Yes, of course. It certainly isn't access to transgender care because that's been around for a long time. So we have not seen suicide rates, either go sky high or plummet in with the invention of this transgender non-care for children. In fact, suicide rates have skyrocketed in 2020 when we know all these gender clinics have been operating before then. So enough with the lies about suicide. It's simply not true. Um, and there's lots of studies that show how the studies have been manipulated to pretend as if the self deletion is really a problem based on the lack of hormone therapy for kids. It's not. If you're interested in what is causing children to be deeply depressed and want to self harm, look into what happened in 2020 because that's the real story. All right, well, that's it for me for right now. I just wanted to read you that article, and I'll hopefully be back tomorrow. I've had a bad allergy attack today, so I wasn't able to be online, but hopefully tomorrow. Don't forget to check out the merch store. See in the description of the video, and also my latest article on the topic. I'll drop it in here as well. All right, everybody, take care.